Thank you, Senator Mungatana. I now call upon Senator Samson Cherargei.
Yellow on. Mr. Speaker, from the onset, I want to support with reservations this Elections Amendment Bill number 2 of 2024. Mr. Speaker, if there is any aspect in this parliament and in this republic that we have over-legislated, we continue to over-legislate, is the issue of elections laws in this country. We have amended the Election Act until we don't know the original Election Act of 2011, Mr. Speaker. So, and therefore, it shows our mistrust, the value system on accountability and transparency and ability to trust the institutions as a country, Mr. Speaker. You no longer know the identity of election law or act as it was assented to by President Mwai Kibaki in 2011, Mr. Speaker. You know, in us who grew up in rural areas, Mr. Speaker, and maybe you also, you used to go to school and you used to walk mungu shoes, or what we call barefooted, and then you used to have short, Mr. Speaker, that used to have a lot of patches in Apigwa Kiraka. You used to, until the original shirt that you are wearing to primary has changed color. And I think that is what happened with the elections laws. We no longer, the original identity of what elections laws were has been changed, Mr. Speaker, through the character. Even in the last session when I chaired the JLAC, we did try and amend and review and delete the elections laws that we have in this country, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, it behooves that the issue with our elections is the deficit of trust. It is nothing else, Mr. Speaker. It is not about lack of laws. It is not about the institutions that we have, whether this IEBC, Mr. Speaker. You are aware today as we talk, Banisa people and other county assemblies are yet to, and even Magarini, are yet to elect their members of parliament, which continues to challenge the validity of existence of parliament as constitution, not only on issue of gender, but in terms of representation. Because the people of Magarini, the people of Banisa, the people of county assemblies, MCS who are yet to receive elections, Mr. Speaker, they are yet to be represented either in the county assembly or in the Senate or in the National Assembly or the National Parliament. So, Mr. Speaker, it is not lack of the laws. It is lack of the deficit of trust in our institutions. When you believe that since you did not lose, and I want to pick it where my brother Danson has left, that where people claim victory, where people go and declare themselves as it should, Mr. Speaker, especially in an election process. Mr. Speaker, I am happy. I think this bill, Mr. Speaker, is essentially wants to do cleanup of the elections laws and elections act, Mr. Speaker. I think it's a cleanup. Others are reactionary. Others are because of political right, you know, want to water down. I've seen the deletion of recall clause based on the decisions of the courts that have decided in Wambui case, Mr. Speaker. And even on the Katiba Institute, where section 45 and 48 of the Elections Act, the parent act, it has been deleted based on a court's decision. Yet we should be reviewing to allow members, Mr. Speaker, because there are many factors, the safeguards this constitution has put on state officials. One is the impeachment process. 2 is vote of no confidence. 3 is the censure motion. 4 is the recall. These are safeguards that the constitution has provided to checkmate the elected officials or state officers within the structure, Mr. Speaker. So when you see this bill trying to delete a section, purportedly that it was based on Wambui case or Katiba Institute case that was being decided, Mr. Speaker, we are undermining the right of recall, which is a constitutional matter, which is given a safeguard, Mr. Speaker, and therefore I found the drafters being mischievous. You know, we'll be creating political demigods. Because now, Mr. Speaker, if you are an elected member of parliament or an MCA, and you know you cannot be recalled, that can be a face of impunity, Mr. Speaker. Like governors, the president and the deputy president can suffer the fate of either censure motion, even cabinet secretaries through vote of no confidence. And Mr. Speaker, even in the essence, the issue of impeachment proceedings against governor, deputy president, or the president, and also in state officers, the vote of no confidence, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, that's my point number one. Point number two, Mr. Speaker, is I'm happy in the section 6, and therefore I don't agree with deletion of section 45 and 48 of the Principal Elections Act, because it comes out as it doesn't come in good faith, Mr. Speaker. Number two, I'm happy that there is an amendment to allow commission voters to be operated and open, and therefore at all times except during elections, during by-election, during general election or a referendum. Those are valid exceptions, Mr. Speaker, but members of public or voters can access the register and be able to verify and confirm their details, Mr. Speaker. And it is also high time as a country and to encourage many young people who are here to register as voters to use the opportunity to register, Mr. Speaker, so that they can make their voice be heard. As you are aware, Mr. Speaker, on United Nations Declaration on Human, Civil and Political Rights, and even the 1948 United Declaration on Human Rights, one of the rights is the right to vote, another right is to participate in political rights as envisaged in Article 38 of the Constitution of Kenya, and even international instruments, which Article 2.6 of the Constitution 2010 of the Republic of Kenya emphasize on that need, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and therefore that access gives impetus. It gives the right to vote, the right to participate in an election, the right to register as a voter is the import that the Constitution envisaged under from Article 80, Mr. Speaker, or 87, 88, thereabout, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, number three, the issue of deletion. Mr. Speaker, I have seen, interestingly, when you look at section 22, I think in the original, that will be number 3. I think the people who should celebrate today, you know, we said leadership, Mr. Speaker, you don't need to go to school to be a leader. When you look at things section 22, we had proposed, apart from other requirements, if you wanted to run for member of parliament, either as a senator or National Assembly, you needed to have a degree. And you remember we had postponed that requirement for almost in 2 elections, Mr. Speaker. One of them, Mr. Speaker, was that you should have a degree from a recognized university if you wanted to, Mr. Speaker, to be run as a member of MP and also as member of the county assembly. Mr. Speaker, this section has been deleted. Mr. Speaker, this section has been deleted. Sorry, it was section, I think it was in Wamboi case, sorry, I mixed it up. In Katiba Institute, Mr. Speaker, where clause 25 deletes section 45. One of the reasons, Mr. Speaker, on section 45 was that before you run, there are minimum requirements like you must be a Kenyan, you must be registered, Mr. Speaker, you must, and I think, Mr. Speaker, that is section 22, sorry, of the act, of the parent act. Mr. Speaker, I think the people who should celebrate the most tonight is the MCAs and members of parliament, because we have removed educational requirements. What you need to do is to convince the voters why they need to elect you. You need to know how to speak Swahili or English or sign language as provided by law. And you need to provide an ID, Mr. Speaker. So this is for people who are arguing that Parliament had intention of locking out any other potential people to become elected members of Parliament or MCAs. Today, if we pass this proposal, it will mean there will be no need of educational requirements, except to know how to read and write, and to either speak in Kiswahili or English or sign language, because those are national languages, Mr. Speaker. And this comes from the NADCO. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't know, it will be now to the wisdom of voters, now that everybody can run. So long as you are not alien, so long as you are now the education requirement has been removed, and this is a significant milestone, because I have many friends Mr. Speaker, who either or another way, they have a reason why they don't do school. They can be good MCAs, they can be good senators, they can be good members of parliament. Mr. Speaker, this is the biggest milestone, and I support, because personally, I believe leadership, Mr. Speaker, should not be based on your educational quality. While education is good, and I want to say this without fear of contradiction, while I support this, Mr. Speaker, it behooves you, I'm also learned. And I'm not saying there is no place of education in leadership. Education will allow you the ability, the capacity, our age. God was gracious enough, we went to school. I'm not saying that people should not go to school. They should go to school. But what we are avoiding is to be discriminative as against the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya, as was said by the Wambui case. I think she was the former member of Otaya after Kibaki retired, and that was the precedent in terms of reviewing of Section 22. So to the MCAs, I know a number of MCAs, Mr. Speaker, has been calling us. When NADCO report was being done, most of the MCAs and a number of members of parliament were worried with this provision. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, even it will assist us with this issue of fake academic documents. You know, as elections approaches, you find some people, even people who wanted to run for serious seats, apart from MCA and MPs, they had to go and manufacture fake academic documents and degrees, Mr. Speaker. I think now that it is no need, I hope the manufacturing and fake will come to a stop now that it will not be needed, Mr. Speaker. But I want to encourage colleagues in leadership that also you need to make progress. Even personally, I'm still in school, despite that number of academics. I'm not professing that I'm more learned than more people here, but at least, Mr. Speaker, as leaders, if you need to grow, if you need to run for governor and president, of course, and deputy president, you must have a degree, and think that's a constitutional provision, Mr. Speaker. So I saw that as a significant, where we no longer need academic requirements, Mr. Speaker, on that issue. On the issue of number 4, in the Gazette, the names of political parties, I think this the principal act, after Section 33, by introducing 33A, we need to know who will run for an election. We need to know who runs with a party and independent candidates. And I think this is very important, Mr. Speaker, so that wananchi or the voters will be well versed. Mr. Speaker, when you look at the introduction of section clause 38A by amending Section 38 of the Parent Act, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the Commission shall appoint a place or polling station for each electoral area, which must be gazetted. I agree it should be published, Mr. Speaker, because sometimes they normally say per polling station or per polling center, at least 700 per, they use classrooms, because most of it we use primary schools. So there are places, Mr. Speaker, like Nairobi, another place where there are huge population. At least IEBC will be given a leeway to increase the number of polling stations so that it allows efficiency. Because you remember the voters sometimes have challenges of sickness, others are disabled. Although I know there is priority, Mr. Speaker, others are expectant, others are sickly, and therefore we wouldn't want a scenario of Kideri man, where a Kideri man just queue with the Kideri and they get head of state commendation. And some people who have worked for this country have never even seen that head of state commendation, Mr. Speaker. So we want to reduce and ensure, Mr. Speaker, that we give that latitude, and it should be gazetted. I think we need to have a timeline on when it can be gazetted, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you look at the Section 30, and so therefore with the new section, Mr. Speaker, the Commission shall determine, declare, and publish the results of election immediately after the close of polling results shall be declared at the polling station that be final. Mr. Speaker, this issue has been canvassed in the court of law for the longest time possible, Mr. Speaker, and you are aware. The law has always said the results declared at the polling station shall be final. And I'm happy this Section 39 that is being introduced, Clause 39, declare the polling station shall be final, so that we avoid where there is stuffing of ballot papers. You know, if you move from one polling station to another, if you move, for example, from St. Francis Chapter 8 polling station in Mosoria to maybe in Daptapwa Primary School, Mr. Speaker, there is a lot of, you know, Mr. Speaker, during election, Satan is always active. He's always perambulating and galvanating.
Could you please approach the chair for a moment? You'll go back and conclude on your.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for those guided directions. I think those were general comments. Let me now delve into the serious issues, Mr. Speaker, on the election offenses. And I think what I was saying, you can tie it up, because I was saying when you are moving election results from one polling station to another, Mr. Speaker, there can be stuffing of ballot papers. And you know, if you are taking from, for example, Keumbu to maybe Siongroi, you know, I was saying Satan is always active during election period. That night, especially, in fact, during even nominations, Mr. Speaker, and the open way to ensure that, and it ties up, Mr. Speaker, with my earlier submissions where I've said, in areas like cities like Nairobi, Mr. Speaker, you find there is a lot of population, there are voters, there are any challenges, Mr. Speaker, and I think it should be gazetted. Say that if you are found in an ungazetted place, Mr. Speaker, it becomes a very serious issue. And Mr. Speaker, this is a serious offense. This is how rigging happens, Mr. Speaker, because you know the worst for any country is to get wrong leaders in leadership. If today you have ungazetted polling stations all over, rigging happens, stuffing of ballot papers, the worst to a country is to have a wrong person in a seat because they will not serve, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of knowingly or intentionally interferes, alters, or intentionally causes another person to interfere or alter declared results. Mr. Speaker, causes another person to interfere or alter declared results. Mr. Speaker, I think we did it in 2007 and we knew the consequences, where people declare themselves, Mr. Speaker, which is very unfortunate, and it must be punished. Because, and that is why, Mr. Speaker, in my opening remarks, and I want to repeat, the challenge we have in this country is not lack of institutions. It is lack of deficit of trust and belief in the independent institutions, Mr. Speaker. For example, if another to interfere or alter declared results or intentionally to interfere, Mr. Speaker, this is a very serious electoral offense. We know it can even plunge the country into chaos. Mr. Speaker, you can imagine if we have two presidential candidates running almost concurrently, Mr. Speaker, I think if we were respecting the IEBC, we should not, Mr. Speaker, because if we have that trust, it becomes very easy, Mr. Speaker, another person to interfere or declare results. Mr. Speaker, when you look at the amendment on Section 6 and the set of the title, I think the upshot, Mr. Speaker, in this report, the upshot, and I just want to run through just in quick succession so that I conclude with this part, is return which they are to keep under written law. I think what we need to do is to vet the staff that are there, reasonable cause to believe to write in FOTA provided for unable to read or write, to believe, Mr. Speaker. I don't know what you mean, because, Mr. Speaker, there are people who are disabled. There are people who are old, who cannot read and write. So we need, so that we don't disfranchise these kind of voters. And you know they are very common in our villages. They might want to vote for Sike or Cherargei, but they only, or Mutinda, but they can only express. So how do we ensure that? Mr. Speaker, permits any person of reasonable to believe to be visually impaired. I think these are PWDs. Mr. Speaker, I think we need to work with disability organization, willingly prevents any person from voting at the polling station at which they know or have a reasonable cause to believe such person is entitled to vote, willingly rejects or refuses to count any ballot paper. Mr. Speaker, I think the process is very clear. A ballot paper is being displayed. When you tick, when you tick outside the box, does it invalidate that ballot paper? We need a ruling, because, Mr. Speaker, sometimes there are more rejected ballot papers than the valid ballot papers, or invalid. How do you classify when people tick two boxes or put an X or a tick, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I think on that, the validity or the ballot paper There is also to count any ballot paper which they know or have reasonable cause is validly cast for any candidate in accordance with the provisions of side region. In fact, Mr. Speaker, this is normally a problem. You see the problem happens, Mr. Speaker, is when the ballot paper is a contest whether it's valid or not. Because sometimes people tick outside the box, others put X, Mr. Speaker, others throw cows. Somebody can draw a cow, or can law, there is new song by Trio Mio called Nimekumak. Some people can say Nimekumak. So you never know. So the issue should be, even a mark, does it qualify to give it a valid, Mr. Speaker? And then number 5, as being for, which is, these are just errors, we need to agree, especially, Mr. Speaker, that, and then, Mr. Speaker, this is bribery. I've seen, just a minute to conclude, Mr. Speaker, this is bribery, and I think this should be punished alongside other election laws. Mr. Speaker, with those very many remarks, I beg to support, and we need to review the issue of electoral offenses so that we can increase more catalog and punish people who might interfere with the electoral process, because invalid election causes instability in the country. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.